Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm coming to y'all with yet another budget knife review. Anyone who's followed my channel for a long time knows that I'm all about the budget knives. That's what my channel started with, and that is what my channel will primarily be focused on for as long as I have any control over it. And my return doesn't change a thing. So this time we're going to be looking at the Enlan EL-06. Now you may notice this one's branded B. A lot of longtime knife guys know that the Enlan brand will label things either B or Enlan, to the point we kind of just interchangeably call them B and Enlan. So you can get this knife branded B, this knife branded Enlan. It's the same knife regardless, so don't worry. It is the exact same thing, just under different branding. Not that different from how Gonzo has been called Gonzo and Firebird, and Sanren Mew sometimes will label their knives under the Land name. It's very much the same kind of thing. So, let's go ahead and jump into this very high value and honestly very decent quality folding knife that you can have for around $20 to $25. I actually spent about $17.99 for this one on eBay, and this is the camo G10 handled version with the titanium nitride coated blade. You can also get this in a stonewash finished blade with a black G10 handle. And I will say, if you're looking for better performance, you probably want to go with the black stonewashed version, the black G10 stonewash combo. And the reason why is that this titanium nitride does cause a little bit of drag when slicing, as expected out of a blade coating. And the traction on this particular version is pretty non-existent. The coating they put over the G10 means this does not offer a lot of grip, whereas the black G10 version actually has a much more aggressive pattern. Its pattern actually looks very similar to this Sanren Mew knife's pattern. So let me see if I can get this to focus. Having a lot of trouble focusing my camera recently. There we go. You see that aggressive patterning, that almost cold steel type patterning? That's the same kind of pattern the black version of this is going to have on the G10 handle. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for peak performance, you probably want the black and stonewash combo. But I'm tired of the black and silver knives. I try to escape them as much as possible, and this is just such a nice change of pace that I went for this version. So let's show off the box. You can see Be Professional folding knife. Just says folding knife on the side. Why am I having so many focusing issues? Need to figure out what that's all about. There we go. Folding knife on the side. Front and back are exactly the same. Down here it just says Be Professional, and then we can see the model number, EL-06PF, which is the desert camo variation. So, nothing much to talk about with the box, but I like to show them whenever I have them. So let's go ahead and jump into this knife review, talking about the blade. Alright, the blade is made out of 9CR18MOV, which is actually branded here. You can actually see it labeled. If I can, there we go. 9CR18MOV. Well, what is that? Well, a lot of folks like to throw around different terms and say, oh, it's like Chinese AUS-8, or it's like Chinese 440C, or Chinese 440B, or Chinese VG10, or Chinese N690. And the truth is, 9CR18MOV, in all reality, looking at the specs for it, looking at the comparison of the steel next to others, it seems to be somewhere in between a 440B and a 440C. It's honestly a little closer to that 440B range, both in my experience using it and from a comparison that I could tell on the chart, if memory serves. And that means it's going to hold an edge a bit better than AUS-8 or 440A or AUS-6. Because 440B is a small step above AUS-8 in terms of edge holding, a big step above in terms of rust resistance, because I've never personally had my 440 blades rust on me. And I live in a very humid environment. So what that means is this is going to perform somewhere in between the levels of an AUS-8 and a 440C. So, you know, moderate edge holding, yes, it's going to dull on you. You can see I've got quite a bit of wear on this blade. I use this to break down several cardboard boxes. I actually went out of my way to test this, alongside the Sanren Mew Land 911, review coming on that as well. I tested these two side by side because they're both in similar price points, similar materials, and they're both copying much more famous knife designs. The Sanren Mew obviously copying the Chris Reeve Sabenza design, while the Enlan is a copy of the SCK, I think it's pronounced Losha or Loxa. A lot of people call this a Sabenza clone. It's not. This is a clone of the SCK Losha. So they're both copying, you know, higher-end knife designs. They seem like a pretty good comparison to make. And I did cut with them side by side, and yeah, it dulled on me after cutting through several cardboard boxes. I've yet to have a steel that won't. I've had knives in S30V that dulled after cardboard testing as well. They held an edge longer, yes. I'm not going to say they didn't. They absolutely held an edge longer. But they all dull nonetheless. And I didn't even sharpen this back up. So what I did was I just took this against a honing steel, and I just hit that a few times against a kitchen steel, and that did bring the edge back to a nice, very workable, very sharp edge. No, it's not hair-shaving sharp anymore, but it is a very serviceable cutting edge. And it's still very paper slicing sharp. I can still cut receipt paper with it without it tearing, so that is decent. I will say, though, that I did have to sharpen the knife upon receiving it because as it came in, it was incredibly dull. It was a very blunt edge. So I did have to touch that up to get that into a nice, sharp cutting condition, which is a bit of a shame. In terms of slicing, it performed pretty adequately. It wasn't as good of a slicer as the Sanren Mu, and I'm not sure if that's because of the thicker blade, because you might be able to see that is a somewhat chunky blade design. There you go. If I catch the light right, you can see how thick it is on this upper portion here, or if that titanium nitride caused some drag when I was cutting with it. It could be a combination of both things, honestly. It wasn't as good of a slicer as the Sanren Mu, but it did slice through quite effectively, and I didn't have any issues with it. We have a hollow grind from this flat portion down, and I do like a hollow grind. I find that hollow grinding can often lead to some really good slicing blades, and in my experience, they tend to take a really, really fine edge when compared to flat grinds. There's obvious exceptions. It depends on the relief edge itself. But in my experience, on the whole, I can get a sharper edge on a hollow grind than I personally can on a flat grind. It is a drop point style design, or maybe you'd call that a clipped point. I'd personally say that's a drop point. And the length is 3.5 inches long. So a good medium-sized knife, adequate for everyday carry usage, as well as an emergency self-defense type of situation, or tactical, I guess, if you will. Moving on to the handle, we have a 4.7 inch G10 handle, and I mentioned before that it comes in both this camo and the black G10. Low traction on the camo version, mid to high traction on the black G10, because it is a very aggressive pattern on that particular version. I do love the handle coloration on this one, though. I love seeing things that break away from the monotony, and I think this does a very good job standing out. I hate that we have a proprietary pivot point, especially because I did not include the tool for that. That is your pivot point head. You can probably buy a tool for that pretty cheap online that'll adjust it, but it is a pain that you have to go out of your way to do so. It looks cool, but a simple Torx bit would have been preferred. In terms of ergonomics on the handle, it is reasonably comfortable. I'm not going to say it's like a crazy comfortable knife, but it is a very comfortable knife. I didn't experience any hot spots when cutting with it. We do have some somewhat squared off shoulders at a few points here, so it's not like melts in your hand type comfortable. But it didn't cause me any problems, and really that's all I'm looking for out of a knife at this price point. There are some things that are more comfortable in its price range that I will talk about towards the end when I get to the competitive options, a segment I've blatantly stolen from the Nut and Fancy project because I think that there's some good ideas over there. But overall, it is a comfortable knife. In terms of speed and deployment, it comes out moderately quick. Definitely not the fastest thing I've ever seen, but it's a moderately quick deployment, and the lockup is solid. There's no play up and down, no play side to side. Thank God for that, because that pivot would be a pain in the ass to adjust without the tool. Deployment method is by a single thumb stud. It can be reversed, though, if you want to take that out and pop it over, but be warned because the pocket clip is a right-hand tip-up carry position only, which I will get to in a moment. One of the issues I have with this knife, though, is the liner lock itself. So you can see this is I believe they call that a captured or a nested liner lock, meaning the liner lock is embedded into the G10 handle scale. And it has these nice serrations here to give us a good grip. The problem is those are really sharp. Really sharp, and they can actually be painful to disengage sometimes, especially because sometimes there's a little bit of a lock stick. Not always, but every once in a while it takes significantly more force to disengage that lock. And of course it's not happening to me on camera, because nothing ever goes that way, but there are times when I legitimately have to push very hard to disengage that lock, or even just bring in my thumb. There we go, you hear that click? Just like that, in order to disengage the blade, which is not the most comfortable lock actuation. Okay, I would vastly prefer a more comfortable liner lock. Another example of that would be that Sanren Mu Land 911. You see it also has that serrated liner, but it's such a dream to disengage. Very easy to disengage. The knife still locks up solidly. This is a better liner lock than this. So I am a little disappointed in the liner there. It's a little sharp and a little bit sticky. Maybe as time goes on that'll wear in, but I mean, I've been going out of my way to use this knife for a while now, and it still hasn't softened up any, so it's a thing to be aware of. We do have some jimping top side of the blade here. There you go, and it's a very short run, and it's partially occluded by the handle, but it is comfortable, and it does work. It does dig in quite well, and it does give you good control over that blade. So very serviceable job on the jimping. Pocket clip is a right-hand tip-up position only. You cannot carry it to the left. You cannot swap it for tip down. And a lot of folks probably aren't going to love the way it carries. Put this in the pocket, you can see you have a decent portion sticking up. I'm personally completely okay with this. I like about that much of the knife exposed because I like having something to grab onto. I could go a little bit less, I suppose, but honestly, that's fine with me. That's basically just enough to get my thumb on there and extract the knife from the pocket. We do have a lanyard hole if you wanted to attach a lanyard through here to, just drop in the pocket without a clip. I'm not sure that's big enough for 550 paracord, though. I don't have any on hand to test it with, but I imagine you'd be struggling to get some 550 cord through there. And as you can see, there's no pillar connecting the two holes, so it could also be a pain trying to feed the paracord through there. The body screws are Torx construction, so if you do buy that proprietary pivot point, you could easily take this knife apart to service it. The weight on here, for those who care, is 4.7 ounces, which is not super heavy, but not super light for a knife of this size. I mean, you can get much lighter knives that are this size and bigger, and part of the reason why is they did not skeletonize those nested steel liners whatsoever. They took no effort to actually go in and mill that out. And you can say that's because they were trying to save money. It's a cheap knife. Well, again, I keep bringing this in, the Sanren U911 here, and the 910 as well, because it's the same knife with the black G10 handle. That's got milled liners. This Gonzo that I reviewed a couple years ago and have well loved and carried, that has milled liners. These are also around that $20 to $25 price tag, so, the budget isn't the concern. They could have done it if they wanted to, but they chose not to. They chose to maximize profit instead of giving us as much as they could for the money. Now, that's not a huge issue because, again, this is a very inexpensive knife, and I do think this knife is worth the money. Absolutely, this knife is worth the money. There's just some issues with it when compared to some other budgetary options. I mean, 5 years ago, this would rank very, very highly for me. I would say this is one of the best knives for the money, 5 or 6 years ago. But we've just gotten so many amazing high-value knives that, this one just isn't aging quite as well. And this has been out for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, This has been out for a good long while now. And it's maybe not fair to be comparing it against some newer models, but I bought it this year. I'm going to be reviewing it this year. Centering on here is actually pretty solid. You can see it's not quite perfect, but damn close. I don't like that the pocket clip screws are a bit longer, because that means that this blade eventually does go a little wonky. It could potentially run into those screws. Not a huge issue, but it's just a thing to be aware of. And it is obviously a flow-through pillar design. So, pretty easy to clean out with some Q-tips or some compressed air if you get something inside that handle construction. Not sure what else to say about the knife. I mean, honestly, I've gone over how well it cut. I've gone over the weight, the technical specs, the issues I have with the knife, the things I like about the knife, which leaves us with my favorite segment, which is to bring in other knives to talk about how it compares for the money. So how about this one? This is the Ethengrau EF55. I reviewed this a couple years ago. I have since given this knife away to a friend of mine who has carried and used the hell out of it. I just got it back from him for the purpose of showing it off in this comparative situation. And, yeah, it's been well used, well carried, and well loved. Beat to absolute hell. I mean, not like crazy. He hasn't like gone batoning through wood with it or anything, but it's received consistent use day in and day out. Opening boxes, breaking down cardboard, food preparation. It's been put through a lot of use. Despite being a Tonto, he's used this thing like you would a kitchen knife. The steel on this claims to be D2. That is a lie. That is an absolute lie. I believe it was Love Them Knives who proved that this was actually 8CR13 MOV, and it performs like 8CR13 MOV. I'm the one who has to constantly sharpen this knife for him whenever it starts going dull, and I can say that it sharpens up just like 8CR13. It holds an edge just like 8CR13. So, in terms of blade steel, it's a bit worse than the Enlan. Okay, G10 handles on here, proprietary screws all the way around. Centering is still holding up well. Lockup, however, after a lot of use, side to side, tiny bit up and down. There's a tiny, I don't know if you can hear that, there's a tiny, tiny wiggle up and down. Not much, but it has developed a little bit of up and down blade play. So, it hasn't held up that great after a few years of use. And again, I say he beat the hell out of it, but really he doesn't go through and clean his knives. It's only been put through relatively standard EDC use, just without any kind of breaks in between. He doesn't switch things up. He doesn't change it over to a different knife, though he does own one. This is the one he carries the majority of the time. And so, I might have to go back and change the score on this, because I gave this a 6 out of 10 in terms of value. With all these things considered, this is probably sitting lower. This is probably about a 5 out of 10. So I would prefer the Enlan EL-06 over the Effengrau, personally. This is a better knife than this. Okay. Next point, how about we bring in the Schrade SCH 503 RB Shorelock. RB standing for red and black. They have this in a few other colors. I don't know if this has officially been discontinued, but you can still find this all over eBay for 20 bucks. Okay, it is an AUS 8 steel blade, so slightly worse than the 9CR 18 MOV. Teflon coated, mid grind, flat grind, drop point blade. Comes out fast, still locks up like a vault. Extremely comfortable in hand. Right hand tip up carry clip as well on this one. No changing that around. Heavier knife though, much heavier knife. I believe this was like 5.8 ounces or something like that. So this is a heavier blade than the Enlan. But in terms of overall value, the fit and finish on the Schrade is a bit better. The steel here is a little bit better. This can actually be deconstructed more easily because we have standard hardware. This is a bit more comfortable in hand. I'm going to go Schrade on this one. I like my Schrade Shorelock a bit better, and actually a fair bit better. I carry and use this knife all the time. How about the Gonzo? This one is the model, if I can get this to focus, G738 in 440C. This is the Benchmade Barrage clone that I reviewed. Carry this knife all the time. Love this knife. The 440C on this Gonzo holds an edge a bit better than the B. Not a huge difference, but just a bit better. G10 handles, axis lock. They can call it a G-lock. I believe I'm pretty sure it's the exact same thing functionally as an axis lock. Flat grind on that blade as well. Also a drop point. Fully ambidextrous left and right hand carry. Dual thumb studs. Lockup is great on this one. Price point is about 20 bucks. I'm going to be honest with you. This is a better knife. The Gonzo's a better knife. The Schrade's a better knife. And how about the one that I've been bringing in all video, the Sanren Uland at 911? Purchased around the same time as the Enlan and tested side by side. I've carried both in the pocket, but I went out of my way to use them both in the same exact cutting situation of breaking down several cardboard boxes because I've been so slow on breaking those down and throwing those away from this entire pandemic. And the Sanren U is a better knife by a long shot. It is a far better blade. Steel is a Sandvik 12C27. In cutting tests, it dulled slightly faster than the 9CR 18 on the land, or on the Enlan rather, but it sharpened up readily. It took a finer edge in the end. It sliced better. We have an even more ergonomic handle, a better run of jimping that is very functional. We can swap this around left and right hand carry, and it does have dual thumb studs, so it is ambidextrous. Some people could say, but it's a liner lock. Those aren't lefty friendly. Trust me when I say lefties are just as used to pulling the liner towards them as we are to pushing the liner away from us as righties. Speaking of which, yes, it is a liner lock design. Very nice engagement, very comfortable to disengage. Pretty sure this is riding on a ball bearing system. And I didn't mention, this is on phosphor bronze washers. If I can get this to focus. Get these things out of the way. Might be hard to show that. There you go. Phosphor bronze washers in that pivot point. But when we compare it against the ball bearing system on this Sanren U, it's just a no-brainer. This knife feels better. This knife cuts better. This knife takes a sharper edge in the end. This takes a pretty sharp edge. This takes a wicked edge. If I have to pick between the Enlan and the Sanren U Land, I'm going to go with the Land all day long. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm bashing on the Enlan. It is a good knife. It is a solid value. It is worth 20 to 25 bucks. But there's just so much out there these days which are better that it's going to have a hard time competing directly side by side with them. And the point of review is to let you guys know, is the knife worth the money, and what else could you get for the money that may be potentially more worth it? Is it worth the money? Yes. Are there better knives for the money? Also, yes. So what it really comes down to is, do you like this design? Do you like this blade steel? And do you like this cool coloration? Because if so, then you may pick the Enlan over the others because those factors alone make it worth it to you. However, for me, I personally have to give this knife about a 6.5 out of 10 in terms of value. Years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, this would have been much higher. This would have been like an 8 out of 10 in terms of value. But now it's definitely been knocked down a peg. I'm going to say 6.5. So that has been my video and my review on the Enlan EL-06. Hopefully it has helped someone out there, and hopefully you've enjoyed the video. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, peace, and I will see you later.